Hello, welcome back to my channel. This might be the hardest book review I have ever tried to talk about and review. Just because there was so much going on and I tried to write down my notes as I went. My brain is always scattered when I try to describe these books too, so it doesn't help because I just jump around from topic to topic to topic. But it was very exciting. The book is called Rubicon by J.S. Dews. Um, I was about, oh gosh, I had to have been about here, like really far in the book, before I realized that the front said it was a Crucible Cycle novel. And then I looked it up, and this is actually the third book in the series. So I think it might be a book series just based off of a specific universe instead of being like continuations from each other. Because I kind of looked into, and I'll talk about the other two books too, even though I haven't read them. I'll read what descriptions they had. Because I looked it up at that point. I was like, I don't think I'm missing everything. It's been explaining everything. It even explained like the main enemies in it. Um, so yeah, I don't think they're necessarily like this was definitely you can read it as a standalone book, is what I'm trying to say. And it was very good. Oh, let me read the back. Okay. It says Sergeant Adrian Valero wants to die. She can't. After enduring a traumatic resurrection for the 96th time, Valero is reassigned to a special forces unit and outfitted with a cutting edge virtual intelligence aid. They could turn the tide in the war against intelligent machines dedicated to the assimilation or destruction of humanity. When her VI suddenly achieves sentience, Valero is drawn into the machinations of an enigmatic major who's hell-bent on ending the war by any means necessary. So I'll talk about the world first. Like obviously with all of these, I try to do non-spoilers first, and then I say spoilers, and then I just talk about the whole thing. So this is the non-spoiler section. Basically, the world is their star system, which they call their star Myra, is dying. So their species has to move out and find a new star system to colonize before it's too late. They do say they have like a couple hundred years before the star dies, but it is happening much quicker than they would like. Um, and obviously they don't want something to happen. Anyway, so they need to colonize new planets. The problem is when they reached out to try to colonize new planets, they ran into this race that they call Mechan, which are these mechanical beings with a hive mind. Um, it was crazy. It was crazy. So these Mechan have built up a defensive wall around their little like planets that they have in their universe, but they're not keeping them in or out. So the whole time they're just kind of confused. The only people that the mech can kill are the soldiers, because in this, they know that the soldiers can do something called rezoning. Basically, they had these chips installed where their consciousness goes into a new, what they call husks, which is a new version of themselves that then they come out of their rezone zones and they go back out. And that's the only people who the Mechans seem to kill, they noticed, are the soldiers, because they know that they'll rezone. So they're not quite sure why. They're just kind of observing them. They don't know what the Mechan want to do. And the Mechan do one other thing with them, which they call hybridization, where they have these devices where they can take them and they can bring their consciousness into the hive mind. But it's too much for anybody's brains to conceive of this hive mind. So usually people don't really remember their experience in it. The main character spent 2 weeks hybridized until her body eventually just died because they weren't giving it any food or water. Side note, you would die after 3 days without water, but it took 2 weeks apparently. Maybe they got water from somewhere. I don't know. Um, but the main character has died 96 times, and she describes the new Husk as being she doesn't feel emotions very easily, and she feels like it might be that she's died too many times, and she does not want to die again, and she does not want to be hybridized. Above all else, she does not want to be hybridized again. That is her main thing. In the very beginning, chapter 1, she's in the 803rd, which is her squad group That's what they're called, is the 803rd. Um, and she basically has to kill all of her squad mates during this mission because they get ambushed by Meccan, and she would rather kill everybody than have them be hybridized, because while they're hybridized, people don't really know, because like the Meccan just control their bodies. So they do like ambushes. So while she was hybridized by the Meccan, she literally just watched without being able to do anything as she killed people around her. So that was it's kind of crazy. It was intense. It was a really, really good book. Um, Basically at the beginning, they do that mission, and then she gets booted up to the 505th squad. So she's in a new squad. And this new squad use things called Rubicons, which is another, like, they have the chip that allows them to reboot basically and go back into their bodies, and then they get another thing put into them that is a virtual intelligence that helps them power their suits. It helps them with any information about like their surroundings that it can gather. It goes really in depth about what these things can do. It just basically helps them with every function of doing these missions. And it doesn't take very long before she realizes that hers is different than the other people's. Hers seems to have like a consciousness of its own, which is kind of creepy. And what I thought the book was going to be would be her fighting against her AI consciousness, because it's trying to make her do things that, is like morally corrupt and everything. I thought that that's what the book was going to be about, of like them fighting the mech and her AI trying to do whatever it takes to win the war, and her like trying to rein all that in. Wasn't like that at all. It was good. I think this book is totally worth the read. It was an easy sci-fi read. I don't think I've ever said this before, but the main books that I like to read are obviously like horror, and then I like sci-fi, and then I like thriller, and then I read like some mystery books. Sci-fi can be a little bit dense, so I understand it's a little bit hard to get through. This was not. It was super easy to read, super easy to understand, comprehend what was going on. I mean, I didn't even know it was a third in a series. So they explain things very clearly, which is nice. And they don't go into over detailing things. Like sometimes, especially with sci-fi books, they'll do 3 pages describing the same room that you're in, and it didn't do that. It was very light and easy read to get through. Um, anyway, I think now I'm going to start going into just talking about the book. So if you want to read it, definitely read it. Put this down. It was worth it. I don't think I talk about many books on here that aren't worth it, though, because usually if I'm not enjoying a book, I just put it down, and obviously, I don't make a video about it. I just don't finish it, and that's that. So I don't think there's many books on here that I'm not like, oh, you should read this. I might have some on here that I'm a little like, it was meh. But this one was good. So it's worth it. So you should find it. Again, it's Rubicon by J.S. Dews. Let me, before we talk about this book, let's talk about the first two. Maybe this is just a standalone book, because when I look up Rubicon and like I look up a Crucible Cycle novel, the things that come up they're under a Divide series. Like The Divide is what it's called. And all the other ones say that they're part of the Divide series. Yeah, a novel of the Divide. So maybe, I mean, this one did feel like its own standalone book. So it could be that it was, which would make a lot of sense to me. Okay, well, I guess I won't talk about them then, since I can't seem to find. I thought it said that this one was the third one. I don't know. If somebody knows, let me know so I can look it up. Anyway, now I'm just going to talk about the book. We're going to go into it. When she gets moved over to the 505th, she gets moved into a spot, and even to her, she was like, this is really weird. People don't usually go from the 803rd to the 505th. It was basically like going from being like the poorest people on the block with like the worst equipment to being like in with the rich people, because like their equipment was like night and day. Like I said, they get this virtual intelligence put into them, which helps power literally everything in their suit and everything that they could possibly need while in battle. And they get fancy new suits and everything. So she was a little bit confused why she even would go up into the 505th. But it turns out that they had one of their squad mates, their brain melted. And normally it'd be like, oh, okay, you just rezone and then you'd go back. But I guess it melted so badly in a way where his brain like exploded, and he couldn't handle the thought of having another Rubicon put into his head. So he was reassigned to a different unit. Um, that becomes important later in the book. Rezoning. Rezoning was described awfully. Basically, it was described as you being like you're gone, and then all of a sudden you're waking up and there's mucus all down in your face that you're coughing up. You're disoriented, you're confused, you don't know what's going on. A lot of the times, and especially with her because she's died 96 times, you get violent and you just want to leave. And the husks take settling in. Like it takes getting used to settling in. Her emotions, like she's basically just a blank slate when she goes over to the 505th. So during their missions, they're mostly gathering like intelligence. They're trying to find a way to stop the Meccan by going to old Meccan facilities. And you find out while they're going to these really old Meccan facilities that the Meccans were actually created by something else, something that they called architects. Um, and it's a really interesting lore because as the book goes on, you learn more about the architects as well. The architects were a race that was also dying, but they weren't dying because like their star was going out and they needed to find a new place. No, they were racing against time because they were dying of a disease. And they were trying to figure out a way to get their consciousness into new bodies, very similar to rezoning. Into new bodies. That way they wouldn't have the diseases anymore. And there was a rebellion that broke out because they created these Meccan bodies to house their brains. And then this rebellion broke out, and the rebellion was basically saying, like, hey, the way in which we had to do this was you had to have a consciousness already in that body in order to have yours get overwritten onto it. Basically, they were saying like you couldn't start with a completely blank slate. It needed blueprints. And that was wrong. So they gave sentience to these things. And that's how the hive mind was created. And then the Meccan created more Meccan, and they just went spiraling out of control, basically. And later on in the book, they find an architect, and she brings it back to the ship because she gets pulled into these special assignments by a Major West. He tells her that, you know, the top one in command is called Thurston, and he tells her that Thurston's written in, the next one down, Blackwell, he's not written in yet, but her artificial intelligence that's in her brain is technically illegal because it's too close to the Meccan that they don't like. Like they're like it can think for itself. And they're like, it's a fine line between having just like a virtual aid in your brain and something else talking to you in your brain. So Major West convinces her to help him end the war. He convinces her that they can do it. And he says what he'll give her in return is like a full retirement package, all these things. She can leave the military and they'll take out her rezoning chip. So she doesn't have to worry about rezoning anymore. She hates rezoning. She doesn't want to do it anymore. And she especially doesn't want to be hybridized. So she agrees. And she's doing all these missions for him, gathering all this intelligence, having to lie to her teammates because they don't understand why she can do things better and faster than they can. And then there's a doctor on the ship who, I don't know why, it's like this other subplot where she's starting to get her emotions back thanks to her Rubicon. Um, they kind of start becoming more human together as the book goes on. Like at first he was very much just, you know, AI was, and then towards the end he's like cracking jokes and everything. Um but he's very much so like at first just artificial intelligence, and she is a blank husk. I don't know why this keeps like unfocusing and refocusing. I don't know why it's trying to focus on. Maybe the light in the background is confusing it. Maybe it just doesn't like how my face looks today because I didn't do anything with it. I just, this is me. I don't know. Anyway, that was a terrible rant. Um Back to Rubicon. Oh no, I lost my train of thought. Oh, this is the problem. It's all over the place. Um okay. They kind of start becoming more human together. Um And her Rubicon just keeps insisting, and it's weird. He just keeps starting to insist that he's there for her. He's not there for whatever Major West wants them to do. He is specifically there for her. And there is a medical doctor in here who it's weird, okay? The way she is described is being like, I think she's in her like 20s, but she's like younger. And he's described as being like older with long greasy hair and wrinkles, and like because he's not like he doesn't have a husk, it's just him. He'd never rezoned before, so he's aging while she isn't. It's I don't know if maybe I just didn't understand the particular taste, her taste, but he just didn't seem appealing to me. But he's the love interest, and he's the doctor. And when she starts kind of getting her emotions back, they like hook up more and more, and not hook up. They like, they start getting together, hanging out. She starts feeling more emotions. Eventually they hook up. And that's when she starts like talking to him a little bit about her like special assignment without really like telling him, just in case, you know, because it is supposed to be top secret and she doesn't want him to get in trouble if stuff hits the fan. Anyway, and that's when he tells her that actually there is no more chip inside of them. As soon as you rezone, your husk is fully synthetic and there's no way to stop her rezoning. So Major West was just lying to her that whole time. So she goes to confront Major West. He's down with the architect that they had captured. They have it below in the ship. And he's down talking to it, and she gets her Rubicon to get her down there without him knowing, and she watches him talking to it, and it turns out Major West's idea for stopping the war was actually to use her as a vessel to make a hive mind with the soldiers, to have the Rubicons link all the soldiers up, do a hive mind exactly like the Meccan are doing, to defeat the Meccan. The architect, he's in the architect's mainframe. So the architect is talking to him. The architect cannot lie to him at this point, but he keeps telling him, he's like, look, my species did this. It was a huge mistake. We should not have done that. Don't do it. Like you're going to make a mistake, because apparently what the Meccan want is to fulfill their creator's wish of having new bodies. So the Meccan are trying to find a way to, and they've been watching, this humanity for so long because they want to use their bodies to eventually have each one of them go in and have their own consciousness and own mind in that body. But the problem is in order to do that, you have to have the other conscience still there. So you would be basically trapped inside your body, having to watch and see what somebody else is doing with it the whole time, your whole life. Um, and the architect told Major West, they were like, hey, if you do this and the Meccan get a hold of them and hybridize somebody who's like that, they're now going to know the way to where they can get inside the bodies. Like, it is going to be like a blueprint for them. And Major West is like, we'll kill them before that happens. And so Adrian is the name of the female soldier in this. Adrian basically like confronts him about it and is like, hybridization is the worst thing. I've been through it. We cannot do that to the soldiers. They cannot be in this hive mind where you are controlling them. There's absolutely no way. And he drugs her and puts her in a cell because he doesn't want her to die, because then she would rezone at a different facility and could say everything, which we find out later is not the only reason why he doesn't want her to rezone, unfortunately. So he's deactivated her Rubicon, so she can't get out. He's drugging her. She manages to use like the wrappers from the MREs, because he still has to feed and water her so she doesn't die, to get out of, to like, because she's got shackles on that are like giving her medicine to keep her asleep. She somehow gets those in there to stop it from being able to go into her skin, and managed to get out enough to where she can barely activate her Rubicon to where it can go and pings the medical guy to come and save her. And he comes, doesn't know what's going on. She tells him. They find out that she finds out that she's been out so long that he's already done it to the whole ship. And he's taking the ship to to one of their main places so he can get everybody else in the like all the other fleets linked up in this hybrid mind. He just has to get Rubicon chips into them. Um and so they realize it's just them, and there's like 4 or 5 other people who are still not hybridized because they were in like quarantine from their last rezone or whatever. And they haven't had their like Rubicons re-put in, and they realize that they have to kill everybody on board so that they rezone and can get more help, and so that they can get out of the hive mind because it's a horrific place to be. So I just thought it was really cool that the beginning of the book she has to kill all of her comrades so that they rezone, and the end of the book is the same but for a different reason, you know. It's kind of the same but a different enemy. I was totally not expecting Mayor West to be the main conflict guy too, and I totally should have. There were so many hints about him being like weird and it being sketchy, and like there was one moment when she was talking to Thurston and Thurston wasn't really reciprocating what she was trying to say. Yeah, there were so many moments. So when she finally gets to Mayor. I keep trying to say Mayor West, I think, because of Family Guy. But when she gets to Major West, he has taken over Thurston's body. So he made his own crude rezone chamber that he rezoned Thurston, took over his body so that he could take over command, so he could do all these things. And then at the very end, she realizes that his body isn't perfect because so the reason why her body would be the perfect host to house him for the hive mind is because one, she rezoned so many times and she was hybridized for 2 weeks. So they found out through research that hybridization and rezoning, it leaves an imprint on your brain. It doesn't matter if your brain's synthetic, it just goes with each one, which makes it easier for another consciousness to go onto that, which was why she was able to adapt to her Rubicon so well as well. So she realizes that he wants to use her body in order to take over her to better control everybody else. And so she rezones herself. She does the thing that she's been dreading to do the entire book. She doesn't want to die again. She kills herself. Very end of the book, she wakes up, and at first you think, "Oh, that's weird," because he had told her that it didn't matter if the other soldiers rezoned because he had fixed the memory issue, so you wouldn't remember anything prior to you dying, which was horrific for everybody. And she's like, "So you had that ability to do that this whole time and you just didn't? Like, you just put all these soldiers through a horrible PTSD from dying over and over and over and over again?" Anyway, anyway. So the end of the book, she's talking to medical, about to be cleared, and like it's like she's talking but she's not talking because she's like thinking in her head like, this is a lie, what I'm saying, I'm lying. And hopefully Daroga, because he's the medical guy, he didn't have the Rubicon and he rezoned, hopefully he can tell people. And he's trying to tell people what really happened, and that the West guy was the one behind it. And like you can hear her having these thoughts but she's saying something completely different. And by the end of the book you realize that West had succeeded and he took her body, and it's her in the back of her own mind with him at the forefront controlling it. Literally her worst fear of being hybridized again comes true, and it's awful. And it was such a good ending. And like that's how it ends too. So you don't even know if he succeeded. Maybe there's going to be another book talking about, it going forward from there to see if he does stop the Meccan or if the Meccan take over and like figure out a way to get into their bodies. I don't know. I Sometimes I get really mad when they leave like endings up for interpretation and everything. But I'm not mad at this one. I like, because this one was really all about this one particular soldier and her fight against them. So I like that they had a beginning, middle, and end for her. So it makes me not as angry over the fact that there isn't an ending with the Meccans. Yeah. But at the end, he's basically saying that, like, oh, he might have to take care of Daroga. And then there's still the architect, too, who knew what happened as well. He kind of helped her fight at the end, but obviously they lost. Yeah. It was good though. The mind taking over, the mind control, the Rubicons were really cool. Like I said, I thought her Rubicon was gonna be the main, like, bad guy, but it was really sad at the end when she, like, has to deactivate him and yeah, and she knows she's never gonna be able to see him or use him again, and they had quite the bond going. It was good. But yeah, this was a really, really good book. It was a great sci-fi book. All right. Hopefully that wasn't too disjointed. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if you've read this book or any of the other books by J.S. Dews, and if this is the third one. I don't know. I This is the only information I have is from reading this book. So if you know, let me know. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.